Good Wednesday afternoon, and thanks for joining us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Lauren Lemanchek. New today, Manny Collins' father, Jordan Collins Sr., is charged with his son's murder. Jordan Collins Sr. faces one count of second-degree murder after being arrested on Monday. He's currently being held in the Anoka County Jail on $2 million bond. Now, Manny Collins was last seen on May 8th. According to prosecutors, he was staying with his father at the time. According to court documents, while searching for the 16-year-old, investigators searched his father's apartment, finding blood-stained garbage bags and several butcher-style knives, as well as Manny Collins' blood. His body was later found in an Elk River landfill, and his father was arrested just over a week later. Lou Raguse is covering this story today. He will have much more coming up on KARE 11 News at 4, 5, and 6. In Central Texas, the search for more than 170 missing people is now in its 6th day. A massive amount of manpower and machinery is being called in to scour up and down the Guadalupe River for any signs of life. Jay Gray is in Kerrville, Texas, one of the hardest hit areas by these floods.
Well, look, it's day 6 of the search, the rescue and recovery effort here. They're adding more assets. 4 Black Hawk helicopters now in the mix, along with more drones, high-profile military vehicles to get into some of the hardest hit areas. We now know, according to the governor of the state, Greg Abbott, that those teams that are searching through areas like this one along the Guadalupe here are looking for more than 170 people still unaccounted for those family members who are in limbo right now, waiting to understand what's going on. They spend their days going to funeral homes here, to hospitals, which are serving as makeshift morgues, trying to find any information they can. The governor talked about those families.
There's nothing more important on our hearts and minds than the people of this community, especially those who are still lost. Know this: we will not stop until every missing person is accounted for. Know this also: there very likely could be more added to that list.
And clearly that's a process that's going to take some time, just with the sheer numbers of how many are still missing here. Another difficult process, the cleanup and recovery, which is just beginning. And really a lot of help coming in that regard from volunteers, hundreds, not only from across the state, but around the country, just drawn here to help so many families who are struggling right now. That's the latest from here in Kerrville. I'm Jay Gray, NBC News.
Happening right now in New Mexico, rescuers pouring through debris after monsoonal rain caused horrific flash flooding in Ruidoso, a mountain town that was hit hard last year by wildfires. Emergency management also says there were between 50 and 60 rescues overnight. The water rising so fast and so strong it carried away a home. Residents in Ruidoso say they've been dealing with weeks of nonstop rain and that they've never seen it this bad.
This is crazy. This is the worst I think I ever seen since 2008. I remember 2008 we had a big flood. It was big for what I seen, but I think this one just breaks records. I mean, it was horrible. A lot of water right away. It was really bad.
In April, 2,400 CDC employees lost their jobs. 2 months later, 400 of them were reinstated. But among those federal cuts were people responsible for drowning prevention. Danny Spiewak explains how that's impacting local groups now that swimming season is in full swing.
We're going to start at 8 o'clock.
In White Bear Lake on Tuesday, the organization Abby's Hope donated its 10,000th life jacket.
I didn't really think my lot in life was going to be working on water safety.
Part of an effort by Scott and Katie Taylor to honor the memory of their daughter, Abby, who died in 2008 after an accident at a public pool.
Something to celebrate her life and to help others.
Abby's Hope also has a charitable foundation led by Alan Korn in Washington, D.C.
Part of the component of addressing injury prevention is public policy.
Korn says he's deeply concerned by federal cuts to the CDC's Injury Prevention Center this April that included a drowning prevention team.
What type of impact does that have on your organization?
That's had quite a negative effect on drowning prevention. We at Abby's Hope and a lot of other water safety stakeholders relied on that injury prevention center for surveillance, for research related to drowning, how, when, where.
In all, the Injury Prevention Center lost 200 employees, according to Sharon Gilmartin,
which is about a third of their staff.
She leads the Safe States Alliance, which works directly with the CDC to prevent injuries like drowning, car crashes, suicide, and overdose prevention.
We have a lot at stake. It's our community safety that is hanging in the threads here.
The layoffs at the CDC's Injury Prevention Center were part of broader Health and Human Services layoffs under Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In a statement to KARE 11, HHS said critical CDC programs will continue as a part of Secretary Kennedy's vision to streamline HHS to better serve the American people. Kennedy has said as much himself.
We have two goals. The first is obvious, to save the taxpayer money by making our department more efficient. And the second is to radically improve our quality of service.
On drowning prevention specifically, HHS says it will continue to support evidence-based drowning prevention efforts across the country. But groups like Abby's Hope say cuts to the CDC drowning prevention team will hurt.
Without them, we're going to have to fill the void with some other way.
The cuts at Health and Human Services are related to Secretary Kennedy's goal to, quote, make America healthy again. He has defended restructuring as a way to both improve health and devote more resources to chronic diseases. Danny Spiewak, KARE 11 News.
Right now, doctors in Minneapolis are sounding the alarm after a sudden surge in gun violence this summer. So far this year, Hennepin County Medical Center says it has treated 93 gunshot victims, including 12 kids. Doctors say it's a sudden increase after 4 years of steady declines. They're worried a violent summer could set back the progress that's been made in addressing gun violence in the community.
It's heartbreaking for them. They're seeing it over and over again. They're frustrated by it, and they want something done. They don't want to see anybody in the hospital with any sort of injury, especially something as preventable as a firearm injury.
Now, doctors on this team are asking law enforcement and elected officials to crack down on gun trafficking and illegal gun sales because they see firsthand what happens when these guns fall into the wrong hands. It's the end of an era as another Minneapolis restaurant staple announced its closing. Cafe and Bar Le Cotte in Loring Park will serve its last customers at the end of the summer. The announcement comes after other mainstays announced closures, Annie's Parlor last week and Palmer's Bar in September. Heidi Wigdahl has a closer look at what's going on.
After 23 years, Cafe and Bar Le Cotte is closing its doors.
And they've sort of been a clubhouse for a certain generation of people, I think, who really started to come of age during the beginning D'Amico era of the early 90s, is when all the chef culture started, and D'Amico was such a player in that.
Stephanie March, editor-at-large at Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine and co-host of The Weekly Dish, has seen some staples recently say goodbye. Annie's Parlor closed last week after more than 50 years, while Palmer's Bar is set to close in September after more than a century.
We're seeing kind of some of the stalwarts, some of the long-term restaurants maybe look at when their lease comes up, trying to decide, is it worth it in this new era to keep going?
Confronted with everything from the cost of goods to labor, and March says they often have less cash reserves than new restaurants.
And they've got excitement and new investors.
In the case of Palmer's Bar,
people are drinking less. People used to make a lot of money on booze, and they don't necessarily do that anymore.
There are big picture factors that play into this, but each individual closure is an individual story.
But Jason DeRusha, Minnesota Monthly food editor and WCCO radio host, says restaurant closures that raise alarm bells for him, Revival, Young Joni, and Le Cotte.
The truth is, people are spending money differently. They're being cautious when it comes to the economy. They're trading down a little bit.
And if your favorite restaurant is jam-packed on a Friday or Saturday night,
maybe you should pop in on a Tuesday and see how it's going. I think that is what has changed. People of my generation, what we did for fun was go out to eat. And because we were going to work downtown, you were going to happy hour somewhere else, and then you were going to dinner on a Wednesday or a Tuesday night. That happens a lot less now.
DeRusha says late night dining is also not as popular anymore.
That is enough to take a restaurant that's on the edge and be like, this doesn't work anymore.
I think this hits harder.
But despite the closures, more openings are coming. March knows of at least 4 that haven't been announced yet.
It's good to mourn the ones that we loved because that kind of carries that emotional thread through the tapestry that is the food scene in the Twin Cities. But it's also okay to say we're not falling off the edge of a cliff. There is momentum, there is movement, there is a new generation coming.
Well, staying on the topic of food, who's hungry? This might make you hungry. The Minnesota State Fair just released their new food and drink list for the 2025 get-together. And it's packed with all sorts of goodness. There's Magdalena's chimney cakes for those with a sweet tooth. On the savory side, stuffed tater tots from Greater Tater. There are several new vendors this year making their fair debut. Make sure you go to KARE11.com. We have a full list there. And by the way, the fair is just over 40 days away. We'll be right back with more news and weather after the break.